Hello, everybody. Hope we had a good morning, good lunch, and excited to have you for the first session of the afternoon. So we're going to speak with our leaders in the agency space today, covering a lot of, obviously, we know agencies are great ally for brands to get them through the marketing and creator marketing journey. I have Luc, Imogen, and Emily from Influencer, Ogilvy, and Publicis. Do we want to do a quick round of intro?
Happy to. Thanks for having me, CreatorIQ, whoever you are. I'm Luke. I'm the president of EMEA at Influencer. We are a global influencer marketing agency, influencer.com, with a very convenient URL. And we do lots of stuff, but really our focus is harnessing the power of creators to humanize brands. It's you.
Hi guys, Imogen. So I'm head of influence in the UK at Ogilvy. I'm sure you know the name, global creative agency. As such, a lot of the work that we do is fully integrated. So with a lot of really big integrated portfolio clients, the likes of Unilever, Coca-Cola globally, the Nestle's of the world. And I've seen the team grow from 5 to around 60 now. So I've seen the whole progression of influence at Ogilvy.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily. I'm from Publicis. I'm a global influencer director there. Been there around 4 years. I'm working with our teams all around the world. So we've got around over 1,000 different influencer specialists in different markets. So leading like a center of excellence for them and building best practice.
Cool, let's kick off. So I know we're just starting, but I wanted to take already a step back and talk about what is creator marketing today in 2024. We know the context has a big impact on what we're doing, how the industry is evolving, and also as leaders and agency giving a lot of direction. So what is creator marketing in 2024? Big question. You go, Emily.
Do we look shell-shocked? So I think creator marketing is in a really interesting place this year. So we've seen more spending on Meta than on TV. We're seeing creators drive 70 to 80% of all the views on social platforms. So it's really reaching a tipping point, I think. But then lots of brands are still becoming comfortable with it. Still, obviously there's a lot of expertise here today, but I think major brands are starting to really assess how they can have a global point of view, how they can really measure and track things. So I think it's in a very interesting space where we're seeing more and more investment, but also it's becoming increasingly difficult to stand out as well.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, I don't know if you saw, was it on the screen before, our titles? We've always used the title of influence marketing at Ogilvy rather than influencer marketing. And the reason that we do that is because we've never believed in the idea of a creator or an influencer, about single social media people who have a certain number of followers. Yes, that exists. But we've always seen that the evolution of the influencer economy or influence economy is not there. It's not in people with social followings. It's about the broader scope of where people hold influence, where brands hold influence, and where we can start to partner different communities together to build more influence. And that's where I think the space is really going today. It's a far more multifaceted, multidimensional space than it ever has been before.
Yeah, I think the thing that came to mind when you asked that question is I think that what influencer marketing looks like right now is kind of the evolution or the future of what brand partnerships are becoming. I think there's something really interesting about the fact that because of what's happened with the social platforms over the last few years, the advent of TikTok, Reels, all the various things that we're all very familiar with about the behaviors that are driving consumption of content on those platforms, 5 or 10 years ago, we were in an era of kind of branded content as being the key way for brands to create sort of less traditional or less kind of ad-fronted content. And that world was really prominent, and it was the kind of the future in many ways, and it was a way for brands to reach younger generations on those platforms. Whereas that era has kind of come to a bit of an end. You look at the BuzzFeeds, the Vices, that I used to work at Vice, I saw it all. The Vices, the BuzzFeeds, all of those companies, the advertising dollars are kind of shifting away from them. And the only way that one of the only ways now that brands can get that same effect of that authentic connection with young audiences is now through creators and more human marketing kind of tactics.
Can I also add on that?
Yeah.
I think one of the really interesting shifts that we can see actually is if you look, this is a really depressing way to start the panel, guys, but if you look at the first quarter of this year and the amount of small agencies that are making a lot of redundancies or that are going under, it shows where the money is going, and it shows that actually if you can't scale up and if you can't look at influence as part of the broader mix and as part of the broader network, then you're not really able to survive anymore, because there are very few businesses that still see influence as this standalone small piece that they add on to their mix. It has to be right in the heart. If you can't do that, then your company is not going to survive.
So jumping on that, because we talk about creators, but something we see a lot is these communities building on social platform. Like social platform become like a space for consumer to talk and have discussions and share feedback on product. So how do we go further than identifying those creators and working with those creators to penetrate those communities and helping the brands lead the conversation with their customers?
Can you reword the question?
Like, how do we identify those communities and engage the conversation with these communities?
Is this where we plug CreatorIQ?
No.
For us, I'm not going to go on about integration again. It is about working with your broader teams and your influence-specific strategists. But it's also about understanding the importance of reaching a genuine community and a genuine consumer need and having a sticky tension point. If you don't have a sticky tension point in your creative or in the way that you're trying to reach your consumers, then it's not going to reach on a broader scale. And we often talk about having an earned first approach, right? The idea is that if it works first in earned and it goes viral in earned, then it will always work in paid, and we would always advise that you use paid. The same is not true in reverse. So when we're talking about reaching smaller communities and driving genuine conversations, you don't need to fear going really niche and going really small, because if you have a genuine tension with that small group of people and you're genuinely answering a problem that they have, then you will be able to get the earned pickup and you'll be able to get the speed and the velocity that you need to be able to reach a much broader audience.
I think just building on that, like this idea of like, first of all, I think you need to understand what a community is in the context of creators and the world of TikTok and Instagram as it is now. Like, I think the idea of a community, you kind of think of like something that's been there for a while and it's entrenched and everyone's really proud to be a part of it. Communities now in the world of TikTok, they're fleeting, they're fluid. Like, and the difference between a community and a trend is actually not that big. They're kind of the same thing. So like, I think that whereas, you know, people think of communities as like Facebook groups, which is a thing that was a thing 10 years ago, like, but that's not what it is. So I think you have to, in order to find them, you first have to be clear about what you're actually looking for. And I think, like, to your point on like where the organic kind of, or the earned slips into the paid piece, that's where communities come in again, right? Because you find out through whether something sticks to a community, whether it can form an advertising proposition. I think that's kind of where it starts.
And then from a brand's point of view, it's great. If you've got people that are naturally talking about your brand and that kind of conversation is happening organically, and those are the kind of things that you can tip into, then I think like that's kind of gold standard. But from a creator's point of view, they're probably involved in multiple communities, having multiple discussions about many different brands. And so from their point of view, they have to be kind of cognizant of like what brands are they talking about, how's that going to affect like exclusivity periods and different things like that. So there's a kind of, a balance that needs to be struck, I think.
I also challenge Facebook groups being a thing of 10 years ago.
No,
Have you been
sorry.
on Crystal Palace Mums? Like, that is a thing.
I still look at the Facebook group of my like primary school, so
Yeah,
I wouldn't
there
say
we
they're not
go.
a thing.
They're a thing.
They're just not a community necessarily in the way that we might be talking about it. But I see what you're saying.
There is serious community. I mean, we still find, if you look at the data, the best type of influencers are the one-on-one or few-to-one conversations and interactions that we have. And I often use an example, my mother-in-law being one of the best influencers I know, because if she wears a certain type of nail varnish, when she goes to her bridge club on a Wednesday night, all those women are going to be wearing that nail varnish the next week. Those are the type of influencers that we want to get hold of, who want to drive real community and real conversation. And I think meta groups really have a strong spot to play in that. Yes, it's not going to form the heart of your strategy, but it can be a consideration.
Yeah, fair.
Different word of mouth, we have also, like you mentioned, a very localized group and community that comes together on Meta. Like, we see a lot of communities also on TikTok, like book club and things like this. So I think there's definitely something there. Back on the social platform, so creator economy is big, brands are investing, the budget are increasing, and so we see the product and the social platform following, obviously, and investing also more and more into connecting the creators and the brands. One thing we're noticing as well is this social platform having their own agency and being expert on their social platforms. So how do you address those changes?
So I think from an agency's point of view, that's quite interesting, because obviously you've got like TikTok Creator Marketplace. You can look at all the individual platforms having their own ways to tap into creators. Sometimes you get a benefit from using those for the algorithms, things like that. But I think if you think about agencies having a kind of holistic overview, then maybe you'll want to run a campaign across multiple platforms, or maybe you'll be identifying the platform that's the right for the audience that you're targeting. So you don't necessarily want to be tied to like having a platform as predetermined before you've started kind of ideating around the campaign.
I think it's very smart of the platforms. First of all, like I think like I remember in the early days of Snapchat, when the struggle was Snapchat wanted advertisers on the platform, but no one was making video that way up. It was all that way, so they had to get other people to create vertical video in order to attract the brands just to the ecosystem and just the concept, right? And I think that, what with TikTok's whole kind of don't make ads, make TikToks, like they needed to help the advertising community make TikToks. So partnering with agencies like ours and others and other types of, and also really standing behind creators as the primary source of making TikToks or content that is native to their platforms is very shrewd, very smart. I think it's interesting to see how it develops, because the juggernauts, the Metas, the TikToks, once they've got what they need, once everyone's making that type of content that is relevant for that platform, then the kind of the infrastructure that they've built might not be as necessary anymore. So I think it's going to be super interesting to see how it evolves. But I think partnering with people that are actually doing the work is a very effective way of doing it. So I think it's a good thing for the industry, but I think it's a life cycle, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as well, for those of you who are from agencies in the room, we often get scared of the next big thing, right? The next new, shiny, scary thing that's bubbling up in the industry. Collaboration is really key for us. It's kind of born into the nature of Ogilvy. We work at intersections anyway amongst our business. Like the influence team works as a separate agency within Ogilvy almost. And so when we're working on campaigns, we're almost always working with partners. So we work with you guys all the time. And like it's all about just being confident in what you do and what you're really, really damn good at, and then making sure that you own that and you keep it consistent no matter how fast your team grows. That for me is whenever somebody brings up, like if someone's just going to work with TikTok, for example, I'm like, well, it doesn't worry me, because I know what we do and our strong suit, and I know that we lead with creativity and with earned first, and that will always make us successful at that thing.
So like across social platforms, having this expertise, helping the brands identify like really where is their audiences or their consumer. But with that, like there's everything on social media right now. Like if we want to find something, like it's almost like a new search engine. Like you get there, you type a product, a service, like every vertical probably is represented on social media. So as agency, do you focus on some specific things, or want like to have this expertise in a field of vertical as an offering, or are we looking at answering to every type of client and brand's need?
We're focusing on building specialisms at the moment. It's a really big part of the work that we've been doing over the last sort of 18 months. So somewhere in the crowd is my co-health influence lead, waving. So we, over the last sort of 2 years, we have our consumer influence division, which is the biggest chunk of what we do, I'll be honest. But we also have 2 really growing, rapidly building teams around distinct specialisms which are needed in the industry. So we have a B2B influence offering, which is purely working with our B2B clients and leading into our corporate affairs team within Ogilvy. And then we also have our health influence offering to really help to clean up the space around misinformation, because we saw that there was heavily growing need within, especially places like TikTok, where you'll find influencers starting to provide lots of information and often misinformation around the healthcare space. So we found that there was there's a need to assist not only creators in how they can talk about these things, but also patients and pharmaceutical clients on how they can talk in these spaces.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't think it's like limited to any particular types of brands. I think there's like it's about finding the space where you're going to fit in, finding the white space where your brand can have a voice, has a right to speak about things, and like coming up with an interesting point of view that can apply to a creator strategy. But yeah, I think we're seeing like a whole range of publicist clients from like financial institutions targeting like high net worth individuals right through to automotive, healthcare as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think like from my perspective as a independent agency rather than part of a bigger group, for me the kind of specialism piece is more about tactical specialisms. So platforms, for example, Snapchat have just brought their Snapstar collab studio to the UK. We're one of the partners. We need to become experts at Snapchat and how to activate creators effectively on that.
It's a big day today for Snapchat. I know you were not here this morning, but it's a big Snapchat day. So love it, Luke.
So that's one example. Another example would be like there's, how to execute ambassador programs versus how to execute a performance-led paid influencer campaign. Very different thing. Very different thing. And I think that like it's about building specialisms in those tactics to be able to give clients what they need is the important part.
There is also like it's not a problematic, but like we're talking with global brands, there's a lot of them in the room who need to think about global strategy, but there's also very targeted marketing approach and local needs or audiences that need different attention. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so we're seeing, where I sit, we see a lot of the kind of global RFIs that come in from like multinational brands. And I think maybe a few years ago, lots of local markets would like take an influencer strategy and run with it and execute it and often be really successful. But I think as brands are putting in more investment and starting to think, like as Imogen was saying before, about having that kind of like influencer work integrated into your whole brand strategy and thinking about it end to end, we're seeing like global brand marketers starting to want to have more of an oversight. So we're producing, for example, quite a lot of playbooks and strategies that aren't necessarily dedicated to a single campaign, but are much more about how is your brand globally approaching influencers and helping not just the marketing teams understand like best practice and where the white space is and what kind of types of influencers they should be speaking to, but also helping like the finance teams understand things like payment terms and like a whole kind of range of helping a broader business understand like the value of influencer and how they can go about it. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that kind of global approach more and starting to see the reporting coming in globally as well.
I think it's never been more crucial than at the moment. So if you look at the last year, it's no surprise to anybody about the huge amount of risk which is suddenly in the influence space, not only with the current crises going on around the world, the wars that we have going on, the number of global elections. I think there's like over 60 different pivotal elections that are happening this year. We are also in a space where for the first time ever our influencers are being demanded to have a personality and a point of view around political issues, which they wouldn't necessarily, or they would have been able to take a step back from historically. And you need a centralized approach to influence in some of these big brands to make sure that actually you're not only preparing your brands to mitigate and manage that risk once it happens, but also to prepare your influencers for what could happen with the integration of paid media going behind so many of your posts. So for example, we did a campaign recently with one of our clients, which was around a particularly sensitive mental health issue. So we had psychologists on staff throughout the briefing process to make sure, and throughout the campaign process, to make sure that when the influencers were not only creating their content, but when the content was going live and then people were responding to that content, we always made sure there was someone there to support them. And then we also had, for example, we create toolkits for the clients, but also for the influencers so that they know, should this happen on the day that you're supposed to post? So for example, huge extreme reaction, but should a new war break out the day you're supposed to post? We don't post in that situation, guys. Or, I don't know, should you get a significant velocity of comments rapidly increasing in a short space of time, again, talk to us before you start to respond to those comments. These little things to help us prepare our influencers, they go a really long way, but they're not possible at a local level always. We need to have that centralized approach to make sure the brand appears consistent. Because at the end of the day, when we're on our social feeds, we can all see those different local markets. It's really important to feel cohesive.
I think there's a part of what you said about like how do we also help creators in their business, like drive value for the creators as well, nurture those relationships with them. So having this expertise also and this knowledge from the agency on this context we're dealing with, and everything that's possible in this industry is very, very important. Clock is ticking. Okay, I wanna maybe wrap up on a big part of what we're doing and a big challenge often for brands to justify budget or for agency to show the value of influencer marketing. So that will be around measurement and reporting. How can we better compare influencer marketing to other marketing and show like the return on investment to those brands?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where the main, not to sound slightly aggressive with it, the main way to measure influencer marketing effectively and to make it comparable is to put the effort in. I think that it's one of those things where measuring influencer marketing is not hard. You just have to know how to do it. Because like a lot of those traditional kind of measurement methodologies around things like brand lift or purchase intent and sort of survey-based measurement, that's all available within influencer marketing. Slightly more complex because I think we talk about this idea of like, for those that have kind of geeked out on old school marketing literature, like Byron Sharp, who talks about reach and frequency driving distinct memory structures, which is how you get people to buy stuff. That's a very layman's reduction of his book, How Brands Grow. But influencer marketing or creators add another layer to that, right? Because they make content that is engaging, that can create a reaction amongst people. But people also have an affinity with them prior to or after that content being consumed. So there's a new dynamic there, which is basically saying that I'm making content which is relatable, but it's relatable not just because of the content, because of the person that's making it. And what that means is that you have to create new measurement environments. So you can't just get a focus group, show them a piece of creator content and say, does this make you want to buy this soap? Because their answer will not take into account the fact that we're working with this creator because they have people that care about them, right? So there are companies out there that do this. We work with some of them, and I'm sure you guys do too. So I think for marketers out there that are worried or don't think it's comparable, it is. I understand it's difficult because it's a new medium and we have to get new methodologies and then you have to get procurement involved. And I get it, it's hard, but it can be done.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like Luke says, it can be done, but I think there's also more work to do. So I think like embedding influencer into media planning tools, which it isn't always necessarily be a good step, then you're starting to think about it alongside the other channels that you'd typically be planning in, which at the moment isn't always necessarily happening. So I think there's like, it's definitely in a strong position, but I think like measurement is always crucial to marketers when they're proving out the value of what they're doing. So I think the more we can do in that space, the better.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of simplification. Nothing that we do is rocket science. My biggest advice around measurement is always, and it's super straightforward, it's just give all your agencies a simple one KPI. Give them one sentence that your CMO or whoever it is wants to hear at the end of the day. What's that sentence or that headline you want to put in your presentation? That's your outcome, and then your outputs can help you ladder up to that. And as soon as you give all of your agencies one KPI, you'll find that we all work together a little bit better because people stop thinking that they're fighting for budget or jostling for something different with the creative or whatever it is that they're doing. Get everyone to work together towards one goal. And then it becomes easier to measure because actually you can start to build influence more into your econometrics modeling, for example, over a longer period of time. Like all of that exciting, tasty stuff can happen, but it can only happen once you bring us all together under one united front.
So like define success and measure against it.
Yeah, as a team, because weirdly, multiple agencies, we can all work as a team when we want to.
We're all friends here. Okay, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for our panelists. Please, big round of applause. And yeah, let's